All right. So I think we have enough people to go ahead and get started for the webinar tonight. So I will go ahead and start us off. So hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us for our webinar series, Residency Real Talk with Dr. Samir Desai. My name is Alyssa Harlow, and I am the Director of Marketing here at MDTB Connect. Please let us know in the chat if you're able to hear us and if you can see us. That way we know. So that would be very helpful if you could do that. This is your first time attending our webinar tonight, welcome. And for those returning, thank you for joining us again. We are so very excited to have you here with us tonight, and we look forward to answering some of the questions that you had submitted using our Google form earlier last week, which we had sent. Throughout the webinar, I will be sharing a bunch of useful resources and links in the chat, so do check that out. You can use those. Many of them are blog posts as well as YouTube videos. And sorry, my cat is meowing in the background so loud. So if you guys hear anything, that's just what it is. Tonight, we will be focusing on the personal statement and some related topics pertaining to the upcoming residency match cycle. Lastly, I did want to mention that our entire team is here for you for whatever it may be. Please feel free to reach out to any of us, myself, Dan, Dr. Desai, if you have any questions, whether it be about your rotation or just about the residency match in general. You're a part of our MDTB Connect family, and we deeply care about your success, and we would be happy to discuss any concerns that you may have with you. So we hope that you guys enjoy the webinar tonight, and without further ado, I will pass the torch on to you, Dr. Desai.
Okay, thank you, Alyssa, and a warm welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining us tonight on Residency Real Talk. This is something that we do on a monthly basis where we try to keep you informed with up-to-date information, strategic information, actionable information that will help you get closer to your goals, which of course is to match successfully in the specialty of your choice. At MDTB Connect, we're honored to have you as part of our teaching and rotation program. We consider it a privilege to have you, as Alyssa said, as part of our MD2B Connect family. And we want to do more than let you do a rotation. We want to give you as much support and guidance as we can in your journey. And that's why we really work very hard to get to know each and every one of you. And you're always welcome to reach out to any of us. Most of you have my direct line. I know I've talked to almost all of you. There are a few of you who may have started your rotation this week that I have not yet reached out to, but we will be talking soon. So I really look forward to meeting you in the near future. So let me go ahead and share my screen so I can show you a PowerPoint. Our focus today is going to be on the personal statement. I'm also going to be leaving some time for the questions that you all have submitted. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, Alyssa, are you able to see my screen?
Yes, I am able to see your screen. If you just want to go ahead and present it, then I'll be able to tell you if the slide is up or not.
So you don't see the slide right now?
No, it just is the PowerPoint app.
Okay, because on my screen, it's showing my first slide. Okay, hang on one second. Okay, can you see the screen now?
Yes, I can see it now. If you guys could please let us know in the chat if you are able to see the screen. That way we know that you guys are able to see it too. That would be very helpful. But I can see it on my end, so we should be good.
Okay, great. So let us start by talking about where we are at this point in time. We are at the tail end of July 2023. We want to talk about what we need to be working on. As of course, we all recognize we are getting closer and closer to September 27th, the first day when programs can download our application. So we do need to be researching programs. I know there's a lot of programs that are out there. It's a lot of work, but do try to research at least a few every day. If you do that, you will make a lot of progress. You will get through the programs that you need to. And researching programs is so very important to so many parts of the application. It's very important to research programs so you can determine which programs are IMG friendly, and not only IMG friendly, but are going to be friendly to your specific profile. Every one of you brings unique features as an applicant, and you're trying to ascertain which of these many, many programs that are out there where you have a better chance. Now, what are you trying to do beyond that in terms of researching programs? You are also trying to see what features of the program fit well with who you are and what you've done. The concept of fit is very important to residency programs in the selection process. So when they receive your application, they're going to be trying to determine if your goals, your values, so on and so forth, align with their mission. And so when you're reviewing these program websites, you want to get some sense of those features that really excite you about the program. And there are different ways to communicate fit to a program to increase your chances of getting interviews. One, for example, is the personal statement. Uh, that is one way to show that fit. There are other ways to do it. For example, when you send an email of interest or a letter of interest to a residency program, your chances of getting an interview go up when you craft a well-written email that shows your fit with the program. So there's a lot of reasons to be researching these programs. Nothing beats your own research, but please make it a habit to do some of that on a daily basis. You should also be working on your ARAS descriptions. Obviously, you should be working on your entire ARAS application. There's a lot to do there, but the hardest part is usually the description fields. Remember that for every one of your experiences you list, and for this year you can list up to 10 experiences, you have a description field to describe what it is that you are doing in that particular experience. Those description fields are very, very important, and you want to carefully craft those descriptions, and that takes quite a bit of time. Remember that we're also here in late July, and that means we have to ask for our letters of recommendation. We want to give our attendings and preceptors enough time to do their work. Customarily, we like to give them at least 3 or 4 weeks to get their work done. So this is the time right now to make your letter requests so that your letter writers can get their work done, get them uploaded into the letter recommendation portal, and allow ECFMG to process them and make them available at the time you submit your application. Now, that also means that you want to help your letter writers write the best possible letter. Remember, letters of recommendation are overall the second most important criteria used in the residency selection process for the purposes of inviting applicants for interviews. With that in mind, your letter writers are generally very open to working with you to write a letter that best serves you. So whatever your letter writers need in terms of your support, please be ready to provide that so you can get that type of letter. And remember, there are some things that are out of your control. It's not just letters that you have to rely on your attendings to write, but we also have to rely on our medical schools to complete their documents, for example, your MSPE. So that is something that is not fully in your control. So remember, anything that's not fully in your control, you want to use the advantage of the time that you have to get it all done. So please do coordinate with your school to get that done. And finally, networking. Networking has been important for a long time. It is becoming more and more important as every year passes. We need to reach out to the people that we know in our network, people that have ties to residency programs, and also identify new people to meet, right? There are people out there that never forget that It's hard to get into residency. They never forget the people who helped them land their training positions, and they want to be there for the people who are following in their footsteps. So don't ignore this important part of your residency strategy. So now let's dive into the residency personal statement. We're going to talk about what you need to know, what you need to do, and what you need to avoid. Starting with the importance of the personal statement. So when I talk to applicants, whether it's one-on-one and groups at institutions, I get a lot of different opinions regarding, how important the personal statement is. I'll often hear that it's not something that programs look at, or it's a very low-rated criteria. It's not something that is looked at before the interview, and there's a lot of misconceptions. Now, for sure, each program has a different way that they look at these personal statements, but it is not true if you're hearing that people say that they don't look at personal statements in the screening process, because some programs and many programs actually do. So this is an integral part of the residency application. It is used by many programs to make decisions about whom to interview, and it is also used in the ranking process. So how important is it in terms of getting interviews? Well, we can turn to the NRMP Program Director surveys. Those are available at the NRMP website. So if you have not accessed this document, it's chock full of information that is very valuable. So I highly encourage you to review this survey. And the 2021 survey included a survey of over 1,000 program directors. And they asked the program directors, what are the factors that are important to you when you're making interview invitation decisions? And they did ask them about the importance of the personal statement. And what we learned from this document is that over 80% of program directors use a personal statement in making interview decisions. That's a very, very high percentage. And since you will often not know which programs use it and which don't, it's important to just assume that every program that you're applying to is going to be using it in making interview decisions. Now, they also asked program directors, how important is this on a scale of 1 to 5? 1 being not very important and 5 being very important. And the personal statement had a mean importance rating of 3.9. Now, this was several years ago, and we are currently in a transition period where we're trying to get programs to be more holistic in the way that they review applications. And so as there is a shift to a more holistic review, the importance of the personal statement may be increasing. Now, how about ranking applicants? How important is the personal statement for that? So we just got through saying that the personal statement is used in the ranking process. And again, in the same program director survey that we've been referring to, we learned that approximately 65% of programs use the statement in making ranking decisions with a mean importance rating of 3.8. Now, you may be wondering how personal statements are used in the selection process. As I mentioned, they are used in different ways. I'm going to go through some of the different ways that statements are used. I'll also share with you some program director quotes that will highlight some of the points that we're going through. So personal statements help us form an overall impression of the applicant, and it allows us to learn things about the applicant that are not readily available or accessible in other aspects of the application. So you can see that this program director writes, I want to know if there are any items that I couldn't discern from the rest of the ERAS application, such as disadvantaged background or a big life event that impacted them in a certain way. So as you're crafting your personal statement, you should really think about how the information that you're putting in the statement complements other aspects of your application. We often read statements that are essentially a rehash of the CV or the ERAS application, and that represents a lost opportunity to make a great impression. And so you do not want to just rehash your resume in your personal statement. This is an opportunity for you to share something interesting, different, unique about you. And I have been working with applicants for a long time, USMDs, USDOs, IMGs, and everybody has something interesting about themselves. It may not always be apparent to us, but you do. And if you can find those things, these are the types of things that you want to brainstorm, reflect on, and find ways into your statement because they really show who you are as a person and what you have to offer. What else do program directors and members of the residency selection committee get from your personal statement? They get a sense of what your communication skills are like, right? This is a measure of your written communication. And since you're going to be doing a lot of writing in residency, especially with your documentation, they want to know how effective of a writer are you. And so if there's a poorly written personal statement, they may draw some conclusions from that. And it could be any one of a number of conclusions, but it could be viewed as a marker of poor work ethic or lack of effort, among other things. One program director said, I get a sense of the fluidity of their thought and their ability to communicate. As we talked about earlier, fit is very important for a program when they're assessing applicants. In fact, that's why the ERAS application has been changed this year. A lot of the changes reflect a desire upon part of residency programs to be better able to assess an applicant's fit for their program. So personal statement can be used in that same regard. So what they're going to be looking for is how do your goals fit with the program's mission or vision? And do you have a commitment that aligns with what the program is trying to accomplish? That is why one size fits all statements are not always great for your chances. Now, there are some programs who will indicate on their websites what they want in a personal statement. Some have very specific requirements. And so you will want to adapt your statement to those programs' needs if you should see language on their website that indicates that. That is very important. And another really important reason to be doing your program research and visiting these programs. So remember, a one size fits all statement or the same statement may not be effective at all programs. Now, how are personal statements used? What's another aspect? Well, we know that they are used in the screening process. We know that they are using them to select applicants for interviews, but sometimes they may be the piece of the application that pushes you into the interview path. So another program director said, sometimes if they are borderline, I'm looking for reasons to invite them. So if you're an applicant who might be on the fence at a particular program, if the statement really speaks to the program director, if the statement is compelling or resonates in a particular way, that may be exactly what you need to get them to offer you that interview invitation. The statement is also used to prepare for the interview day. Quite often, interviewers will read the personal statement as part of your file right before they have the interview with you. And they will use what they learn from you in the personal statement as a point to start the interview. So there may be something that intrigues them or catches their interest in the personal statement, and that might be where the interview starts. So you want to make sure that before every interview, you review your personal statement and you're ready to talk about whatever's in that statement, because it could be that the bulk of the interview is focused on the content of your statement. Statements are used in the ranking of applicants. So one program director said it's one of the components for which people can move up or down. If two applicants were completely equal and one had a really great statement, then we would rank that person higher. So what should personal statements include? Now, I will say that most of you have our book, The Successful Match, and there's a very extensive chapter in that book on personal statements. And that chapter is evidence-based. And we break down what programs are looking for in personal statements by specialty. Now, not every specialty has studied this, but surprisingly, a good number of specialties have provided insight into what they are looking for in the statement. So that chapter in the Successful Match book is really, really important to go over. For those of you who've just started our rotations, you'll be getting that in the mail very, very soon. Now, as far as what they're looking for, of course, compelling content that makes you stand out. you really want to think about how you can be remembered through your statement, of course, for the right reasons. And that often begins with something that catches their attention. Too often, statements begin with something that's very, very bland, but we want something that grabs their attention. Remember that there are hundreds, if not thousands, of applications the selection committee is going through. And if you can catch their attention from the beginning of the statement, then you will have them all the way through to the end of your statement. That often doesn't happen. So it's really vital that you think about how to start it off on the right foot. So you can see this program director writes that it often gives me a unique hook about the person that sticks with me. And I sometimes catch myself thinking of that candidate and even referring to them as the one who wrote about blank in their personal statement. So we know from evidence in the field, as well as conversations we've had with program directors and residency selection committee members, that if you can be remembered for something, you have really done a good job. So what I mean by that is I'll give you an example. Some years ago, we had an applicant who uh, wasn't sure how to start his personal statement. He wanted to go into internal medicine. He had done some interesting research on honey. And the interesting part of that was that in order to do that research, he had to become a beekeeper. Now, prior to that, he was deathly afraid of bees. So it took a lot out of him to overcome his fear. And he became a beekeeper. And that's how we started his personal statement with a compelling story about his fears and how he overcame them to be a beekeeper. And that led into the rest of his statement, including content about his research and how he wanted to make contributions in internal medicine in different ways, not just through his research, but also helping people overcome their fears as it relates to their health. So in writing that type of statement, what ended up happening is when he went on the interview trail, that personal statement was read by his interviewers. And because it was different, not there weren't other people writing about beekeeping, he became known as the beekeeper. And that was remembered at the end of the interview day. And if you can be remembered for something good, then you've really uh, done something that's resonated with the program. What else did the personal statement include? It should include information that shows how applicants' interests match those of the program. So that's the concept of fit that we've talked about. Now, of course, it should be well written. As we said, it should be easily readable and interesting. We want to highlight unique characteristics and experiences. And again, everybody has something that's interesting and unique. It, again, may not be immediately apparent, but if you read the chapter on personal statements and the successful match, we go through this process of brainstorming, which will allow you to find those unique characteristics and experiences. Now, if there is a area of concern in your background, something that is noted in the literature as a red flag, you really need to give some serious consideration to addressing that in your statement. Many conversations I've had with program directors in every field have shown me that programs want to know what happened. And if they have a understanding of what it is that happened, then they feel much more reassured about whatever that area of concern is. And you have a better chance securing an interview if they have that understanding. Some applicants believe if they'll say, oh, I won't address my red flag in the statement and I will address it if I get an interview. But they are assuming that they will get that interview if they don't address the red flag. And so my recommendation, based on years of experience advising applicants and sitting on residency selection committees, is that you have a better chance of getting an interview when you address areas of concern in a personal statement. Now, of course, you can do that in the personal statement. You also have other areas of the application where you can address concerns, for example, in the impactful experience section of the ARAS application. If you had your medical education extended or interrupted, there's a box or description field that you can provide an explanation for. So there are multiple places where you can address this. And if you do have an area of concern, I would highly recommend that you talk to your advisors or talk to me so that you have a good idea of how to present that. Not all areas of concern are as big as you might think. Sometimes they're not as big as they might seem, and so sometimes they're not necessarily important to address them in the application. But again, this is a tough one for a lot of applicants to discern. So if you're not sure about what to do, if you have something you're concerned about in your background, just reach out to me and I'm more than happy to talk to you about it.
Hey,
Now,
Dr.
what do you
Desai,
want?
just real quick, somebody had said in the chat that they were having some difficulty hearing us and seeing us. So if you guys could please just let us know if you're noticing any technical difficulties. Not sure if it's from our side or possibly somebody else's side, but if a couple people could let us know if they're able to hear and see us correctly, that would be helpful. So thank you.
Let's just take a moment to get a little feedback from multiple people to see if there are any technical issues that are in play.
Okay, so it says somebody said that they have no issues seeing or hearing. So for the person that is experiencing some technical difficulties, maybe try checking your network or try rejoining. That might fix the problem. So I think we may be okay. So we can keep going. But thank you guys for letting us know.
Great, and do please send us a message if there are any problems that occur. Now, what is it that you want to avoid in these personal statements? Of course, errors, careless errors where we see grammar or spelling mistakes. These types of errors will make programs wonder if you're going to be equally careless with regards to your work as a resident. So one program director said misspellings, bad grammar, poor attention to writing detail are a big sign that they maybe don't have the attention detail. We want to avoid commonly used statements or cliche statements. We want to avoid sending the wrong statement to a program. I just got through saying that sometimes we will want to write multiple statements. We might be applying to several specialties. We might want to tailor some statements to certain programs. We have seen at our own residency program where the wrong statement has been assigned to our program. It can be an easy mistake to make. So be very, very careful if you're writing multiple statements that you assign the proper statement to the proper program. What else do you want to avoid? Again, not giving a program a sense of who you are. This is something that we see a lot of. Again, we don't want to rehash the CV. We want to give them information about us that complements what's in the CV. Things that they would want to know about you. You know, who are you as a person and a professional? What has shaped you to be the person, professional that you are today? What are the qualities and skills that you would bring to a residency program? The type of contributions you would make. These are some types of things that may not be easily placed in other aspects of the application. Not showing interest in their specific program. Now, we know that most applicants will write one statement that will go to every program. For those programs where you think you have a better chance, you can write a program-specific personal statement. We've actually addressed this in a podcast episode where we talk about how you can personalize a statement to a particular program. Now, if you're applying to 150, 200 programs or more, it's going to be very difficult to personalize statements for every single program. So in practice, very few applicants write 150 or 200 different personal statements, but there may be some percentage of that large group that you decide to write a program specific personal statement. Again, some of that could be governed by what the program wants. So if on the website they ask for something specific, if you want more consideration at that program, the chance to really be interviewed, you're going to have to meet their needs. So again, remember, showing interest in their program is something that is important and can be done through a personal statement. Be careful about writing negative things in a statement. It can backfire on you. So just be very, very careful about that. And it's important to not overdo it. We're not trying to be over the top. We don't want to show arrogance or overconfidence in one's abilities or achievements. At the same time, we don't want to understate things either. So there can be a little bit of a balance that we need to strike here. Now, even though we have quite a bit of research on the personal statement, and that is good because it gives us some insight into what we need to write and how we need to write these statements, there are some areas of disagreement, and sometimes the disagreements can be a bit surprising. So, one area where there has been some disagreement is related to future plans. It's common for applicants to include some content in their statement about what they're planning to do in the future, which, as you can see from this slide, these two program directors have different viewpoints of how important they feel the inclusion of such content is. So program director one says, I look to see if people have, at least at that point in their career, an idea about their career trajectory and any long-term career goals. Program director two writes, I don't think that the personal statements have to say necessarily what someone's career trajectory is. Many people don't know. I don't think there's anything specific that has to be there. There's also some disagreement on the patient story. It's not uncommon for applicants to include a patient story, and if it's done well, that can be something that resonates with programs, but there are different opinions here as well. Program director one writes, I always enjoy a patient story, just because they're going to be doing a medical career, so I want to make sure they're connected to patients. Program director two writes, I think over-reliance on a patient story to tell a message that may not be very unique. So our feeling from years of advising people on personal statements and sitting on these residency selection committees and going to all these conferences is that patient stories can still be very, very effective, but they have to be presented in the proper light and they have to show things about you. Quite often, these patient stories tend to be a little bit more observational, but we like patient stories that show some type activity related to the applicant, meaning there's something that the applicant did that was significant or revealed something significant about what they took from that experience. So I think what you're trying to do here is trying to come up with something compelling that will resonate with the interviewer. Do you have to start your personal statement with a patient story? No, there's lots of different ways to start your personal statements. It's not even required that you include a patient story in your personal statement because there are so many ways to write these statements. But patient stories can be effective, especially for IMGs, because one of the things that program directors are looking for is evidence that you have substantial US clinical experience in the United States. And not just substantial clinical experience in the form of many months of US clinical experience, but they're very interested to know that what you're experiencing in these rotations are significant. And appealing a patient story and showing what your involvement and contribution was related to the story can really drive your experience home to those residency programs. They might also disagree on expressing your interest in the specialty. Here, program director number one writes something that references why they're choosing the specialty because there's nowhere else really in the application to do that. Another program director writes, I often just skip over those short paragraphs or the short statements about why I'm interested in internal medicine or how I fell in love with internal medicine. I find those less helpful because you're applying to internal medicine. Of course you want to do internal medicine. So we may all believe that, of course, every program director wants to have content that reflects your interest in why you're going into internal medicine. But as you can see from these two very different program directors, that they may not necessarily agree on that. So the point that I'm making is with these personal statements, they're very, very personal. Every applicant has a feeling about what they want to put in their personal statement, and every program director has some feelings about what they like to see in the program, in their personal statements. So when you read the chapter on personal statements in the Successful Matchbook, that's what's going to give you the evidence that will help guide your decision making on the content. Because there we weave in the scientific literature on each specialty and what most program directors in those specialties are looking for. Now, are you going to get 100% consensus? Is there going to be everybody that's in consensus, right? Everybody thinks this stuff needs to be in the personal statement. No, there's always going to be some difference of opinion. But in that chapter, you're going to get a good idea of what needs to go in there, depending upon what specialty you're applying to. So for more information about personal statements, as we said, take a look at the Successful Match book. Please note that we do have personal statement content on our blog, which is at thesuccessfulmatch.com. I know you all have been to md2bconnect.com, but we have our sister website, thesuccessfulmatch.com. And in addition to blog posts on personal statements, we also have podcast episodes from our podcast, Success in Medicine. As I mentioned earlier, if you're interested in writing a program-specific personal statement, check out that podcast. Now I'm going to go into questions that you all have submitted in the last few days. So I'll answer these questions. First question that we received is, do you have any ERAS application tips? So I have lots of ERAS application tips, but one of the key ones that I will provide you has to do with the description fields. Now you have 1,020 characters to describe each of your 10 experiences, and you want to use most of that description field. You want to look at that description field with two things in mind. Number one, what is the content that you've shared? And number two, how has it been written? Because it's going to be evaluated in terms of the content and the writing. Now, when you're creating the description fields, you should be thinking about how the pieces fit with one another. So if you have 3 clinical experiences that you've done in the US, you want to be thinking about what goes in each description field and how it adds more information about you as an applicant. Now, to some extent, you may have to cover common ground in those 3 clinical experiences, but there will be enough space there to show things that you experienced in one rotation and then other things that you experienced in another rotation. This is going to give programs a better look at the comprehensiveness of your US clinical experience. So try to see how the pieces of one experience fit with the pieces of other experiences. Now, how do you stand out with your application? So it really depends on what aspect of the application you're talking about. So if we're talking about the ERAS application, we just talked about one tip in terms of how do the descriptions of each US clinical experience complement one another. Other ways to stand out in the application, of course, is what today's focus is on the personal statement. So every piece of the application you want to optimize. And that process means that you have to take a step back and do quite a bit of thinking before you do the writing. So for the ERAS descriptions, you need to do a lot of brainstorming on what it is that you experienced. So for example, if you were doing a US clinical experience, and let's say it was an ICU rotation, and perhaps because you did that ICU rotation, you had the chance to be involved in some very difficult patient cases where there were some challenging ethical issues involved. Well, when you get to residency, you're going to be in the ICU. And as a resident, you're going to be confronting those same ethical scenarios. So if that's something you've experienced in the ICU, in addition to writing about your responsibilities in the ICU, whether you took histories, whether you examined patients, presented cases, you might want to include some of these other things that you've experienced that you know will be looked upon by residency programs as valuable experience. And an ethical, a bit of content about the ethical scenarios you encountered could be an example of that. So you're looking for ways to show programs that the experiences you've had have been immersive and have readied you for your residency training. These are the types of things that we often don't see in the description fields for clinical experiences, for research experiences, for volunteer work, so on and so forth. Another question that we received had to do with how to write an interest letter. and who this letter should be sent to. So, what the question is referring to is expressing interest in a residency program. There are different ways to do that. One of the most common ways is to send an email, essentially a letter of interest to programs by email. Now, I have been involved in residency selection at several different universities, and we have received a lot of letters of interest. Most of them, I will tell you, are not done very well. And when I say that, what I'm referring to is that it looks like that same letter could have been written for every program in the country. Now, if you want to write an effective letter of interest, you really have to personalize it to the program. So, this is again where your program research comes into play. And if you do that, in the process of personalizing the email, if you're also including how that fits with you as an applicant, in other words, you're saying something, but why is it that you're saying that? If that becomes more clear to us, then that's something that we take a bit more notice of. So that is something key that you want to include in an interest letter. As far as who should you send this to, that is an excellent question. So typically these are sent to the program director. Now, if you look at a program director's inbox, they get several hundred emails a day, many of which are coming from applicants. And it is not possible for a single person to easily get through all of that on a daily basis. And that's becoming more and more of a problem. And so that's why, if you're going to send an interest letter, it really has to be done well because that's more likely to stand out than the more typical interest letter that just blends in with everybody else. Now, as far as who to send it to, you can send it to the program director, nothing wrong with that. But there are other individuals you might want to send it to. Every program has some associate and assistant program directors and other uh, core members of the residency selection committee. Associate program directors don't get as many emails as program directors, but they also have a lot of clout, a lot of say in the interview decision-making process. So these communications can be sent to other people in the department. Now, the next question is it necessary to email programs during the interview season? No, it's not necessary, but what I can tell you is that applicants in the past have been able to land interviews following their email communication with programs. So it is something that has been known to work before. And so it may be in your best interest to send those emails, again, if they are properly done. Now, when you're sending these emails, you can also provide updates. Okay, one of the things that I tell applicants is to keep doing things during the interview season. Because when you keep doing things during the interview season, it gives you an opportunity to write to a program with something new, an update, so to speak. And sometimes the update is what you need to get pushed over into the interview pile. And so you can be strategic, even during interview season, in what you do. So this is something to give some thought to. On top of this, it's important to keep doing something because when you get to the interview stage, programs will often ask, so what have you been doing since September when you turned in your application? So I want all of you to give some thought to that because that may give you a reason, again, to update programs and also give you a way to communicate something very salient to them when they ask you, what have you been up to since September? Next question, how do we select residency programs that makes us confident on getting an interview? So obviously there's no guarantees in this process, but we want to enhance our chances of getting as many interviews as possible. So again, this all comes back to our research. The more research you do, the more of a targeted effort you can put forth to attracting interest from programs. All of these programs are looking for people who are sincerely interested in them. Now, many applicants are sincerely interested in the programs that they're applying to, but they may not be able to express that through their written application. But if you can get that across through the different ways that we've been talking about, they are more likely to take a serious look at you. Remember that every program gets thousands of applications, and they can only interview about 10 to 20% of that total applicant pool. So they are making mistakes and overlooking really, really good people. And so we don't want to be part of this group of good people that get overlooked. So the first thing we need to do is select programs that we're applying to that we think we're going to have a better chance at. So of course, those are IMG friendly programs. And we want to look at their resident roster and determine if the residents on their roster fit with our profile, right? We all have a certain year of graduation, we all have certain step scores, we all have a certain amount of US clinical experience, and we're trying to figure out what typical profile is of that applicant that they're interested in. And we can do that from the information on their website as well as their resident roster. And once we take all that into account, this big list of IMG friendly programs, we get a better idea of the percentage of programs and the number of programs where we think we have a better chance. And then from that list, we want to do some targeted efforts, right? We may want to signal some of those programs, which we'll talk about here in a minute. We may want to write very specific emails of interest to those programs. We might want to write a program-specific personal statement. We may want to focus our networking on certain programs based on our research, and then hopefully meet people who are willing to advocate for us at those programs. So there's a lot of strategic efforts that can be put forth over the next couple months to increase your chances of getting an interview at many, many programs. How do I select geographic preference? Well, first of all, you don't have to select a geographic preference. It's not something that you're required to do, but it's something that you should seriously consider. I was just having a conversation the other day about this, and we were talking about a particular specialty. And as we were talking about this applicant's profile, we were looking at the programs around the country and considering where this applicant's graduates of his medical school had matched previously in this specialty. And that became very, very insightful in terms of deciding whether to select a certain geographic division of the country to mark in the application. So there are multiple geographic divisions that are available for you to mark, but some of them may be far more IMG friendly for your specific situation than others. And if you find that the bulk of your programs that are friendly to you are in a few geographic divisions, then it makes a lot of sense to mark those divisions as your geographic divisions of preference. So there's a lot of strategy to this. There are some nuances. It's hard to offer specific tips because everybody is a little bit different in terms of what they're applying for, what their background is, what strengths they're bringing as an applicant. And so if anybody is not sure what to do with geographic preferences, you are welcome to reach out to me. You have my direct line, or if you don't yet, you will soon enough. You just reach out to me and we can talk about your specific situation and kind of decide what the right strategy is. Okay, another question had to do with how do I write an MSPE as an IMG? My school doesn't give evaluations on rotations, and subjects like internal medicine are broken into separate rotations like hospital therapy and basic therapy. So as far as how to write an MSPE, I would recommend that those of you who are involved in helping your school draft your MSPE go to the AAMC website and look at their MSPE section. There are several templates there of the format that is preferred. That is the format that you would like your school to follow. As far as the evaluation section, there is a section in the MSPE where for the US medical student, whether you're USMD or DO, they list the rotations that you've done as a third year medical student and part of your fourth year. And in that section, the narrative comments that were placed in the evaluation forms by attendings and residents who were working with that student, quite often they are placed in this MSP section word for word. And so that is something that is very, very common here in the US, but it may not be common in other countries. The evaluation may not be like that. And so if it's not there, you don't necessarily have to include that, but you can include other information about your evaluation. So if you were evaluated in a different way, that's the part of the MSPE where you can shed light on that evaluation system. And if you have subjects like internal medicine that are not necessarily called internal medicine, again, in that section, you can indicate that your internal medicine rotation is actually divided into different parts, like hospital therapy and basic therapy. So there is some room there for explanation that can be very, very useful to residency programs. So how to get matched to internal medicine? That's a very, very broad-based question. Again, I would refer you as a start to the NRMP Program Director Survey, where they ask program directors, what are you looking for in applicants as far as inviting people for interview and in ranking them? I would also invite you to look at charting outcomes in the match. And I would invite you to look at our book, The Successful Match. There's a chapter on internal medicine where we go into specific aspects of what it takes to get into internal medicine. For example, what are programs looking for in your letters of recommendation? What are they looking for in your personal statement? That information is all in the Successful Match book. Somebody wanted to know about signaling programs. So that's something that's relatively new. It was started in the last few years. Again, this has been developed so that programs can have a better feel for who is interested in them. And these signals can be very, very important. And just as we've been talking about before, about being strategic, it's really important to bring some strategy to the signaling process. The more research you do on these programs, the better you're going to be able to use your signals. My preference is to signal programs where you have a real shot, because the more interviews you get, right, the better your chances of matching. Some people use their signals at programs where they have a chance, but it's not a great chance. And if you use all your signals at programs like that, you could be in a situation where you don't net very many interviews from your signals. Keep in mind that from the surveys that we have done on program directors on signaling, that some programs will actually invite everyone that signaled them for an interview. So it can have a very powerful effect on your interview chances. So we need to signal well and do a lot of research to form the basis for our signaling decisions. Another question had to do with visas. I recently heard that choosing J1 or H1 instead of just J1 on ERAS dampens the chance of getting an interview. Is there any truth to that? Whoever wrote this, I would invite them to reach out to me personally so I can get the context of where they've heard this. I will tell you that H1 visas are getting harder and harder to get. J1 visas are easier for programs because they don't have to do as much work. There's not as much administrative work on their end. There's not as much money they have to put into the process. And so as the years have gone by, H1 has become less commonly offered. But whoever it is that submitted this question, please reach out to me so I can understand the context of this, so I can give you better advice on how this affects your interview chances. We had a few questions about tips for interview preparation. In the Successful Matchbook, there are over 150 pages of detailed interview prep. Everything from what do you do before the interview, what do you do when you don't know how to answer a question, what do you do on the interview day. There's a lot in there. There's also a chapter on how to create compelling answers to high yield questions. So start with 150 plus pages of interview prep in the Successful Matchbook, and then go to thesuccessfulmatch.com and access our blog. And in the blog search engine, put in residency interview, and you're going to get a lot of articles that complement what's in the Successful Matchbook. The Successful Matchbook is something we update every so often. And so as we learn new things about interviewing, we are able to provide that information faster on our blog. So check out the blog. There's one article there on the 325 most common residency interview questions. And so that's going to be something that you really want to take a look at. And then we also have a podcast called Success in Medicine where we tackle different interview topics. In some episodes, I've actually taken an interview question and shown you how to create a compelling answer to that. Also on the successfulmatch.com website, there are videos before and after answers of applicants responding to certain questions. There's also an interview course available at that website. So a lot of resources that we have to help you with interviews. And if you stay with us in this webinar series, we will start devoting our entire episodes to residency interviewing. We will do that as we get into September and then October and November. Okay, that brings me to the end of our PowerPoint presentation. Hope you have found the presentation informative. And Alyssa, let me hand it back to you.
All right. So thank you all for joining us tonight. We're so happy to have you. If you guys did drop some questions in the chat and we weren't able to get to you, please feel free to reach out to us personally, and we would be happy to answer those questions for you. Like Dr. Desai said, you have his personal line, so you're welcome to call him about any concerns that you may have. As always, you're a part of our MD2B Connect family, so please feel free to reach out to us for whatever it may be. Even if it's a question from tonight, or you just need somebody to talk to because you're stressed out about the match process, just please feel free to reach out to any of us on our team. We are always here to help you, and we want to make sure that we are supporting you and that we are helping you along this process. So please feel free to do that if you feel so compelled to do so. And thank you so much for joining us tonight. So Dr. Desai, you have any last words?
Yes, absolutely. So I want to echo what Alyssa said, that we are available to you. I would love to hear from you every so often about how things are going. I don't ever want you to feel like you're alone in this process. I hope you realize that we want to support you in every way. We have a lot of resources that can empower you with the information you need to make good decisions. And of course, it's my pleasure to get to know each and every one of you. And so if I can offer personal advice for your specific situation, I'm happy to do that. And that's not just during your rotation. You're always welcome to reach out to me even after your rotation is over, even just to say hi. I always love to hear from you. One thing that I just wanted to kindly ask everyone, recently it's come to our attention that people have had a hard time finding out about us in the form of reviews. We do have a Google page where we have a lot of reviews, but it's my understanding that those reviews are not always easily accessible when you search for MD2B Connect. And one of the things that comes up on the search engine very high up is Trustpilot. So Trustpilot, for those of you who are not familiar with it, is a review site. And we have relatively few reviews on Trustpilot. And so people who have reached out to us have said, oh, well, we can't really learn a whole lot about your program from people who've done rotations with you because we only see a few reviews on Trustpilot. So I want to kindly ask all of you, if you have a few minutes tonight or in the next few days, you could just go over to the Trustpilot website. So in the Google search engine, just put in MD2B Connect Trustpilot. And if you could be kind enough to put in some words about your experience with us. I think it would really help other people who are thinking about us learn about what we do and how committed we are to helping our students match. Alyssa, did you want to add anything related to that?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I shared the link to that in the chat. If you're able to go ahead and grab that for us, we would really appreciate it. Obviously, we want your guys' honest opinion, so please let us know. I did also want to mention that I know I sent a lot of links in the chat tonight regarding like blog posts, videos. So feel free. Those are all on either our YouTube channel, on thesuccessfulmatch.com, or on our actual website, mddbconnect.com. So you can access all that information there. And I did want to mention as well that we will be sending out a recording of this webinar in a few days. So you'll receive that via email, and that should come to you in a couple days in a link. So I think that's it from me.
Thank you, Alyssa, and thank you to all of you for attending today. Again, don't hesitate to reach out. And for those, again, who have just started in our rotation program, really looking forward to getting to know you. Have a great night, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you, everybody, for joining. Have a great night.